We are going part 3 tonight of a series that we are calling just Most Important Names. Who are these names that are not just going to impact their teams, but then they're going to have a disproportionate impact on the teams around them, their conference, division, the entirety of the sport, dare I say. So let's dive into this tonight. Most important names in college football this year. I'm going to go to College Station. Devonta Chain he's a guy I love to listen to Jimbo Fisher talk about. Jimbo Fisher, when he talks about Devonta Chain, he almost talks about him as if he has taken it personal, that he has not gotten more push nationally. And I get why he's saying it because he knows what caliber of player he is. I also get why he has not gotten more national push. It's because he hasn't been a feature back there. He will. Theoretically, he's got that opportunity to be this year. He split time with Isaiah Spiller last year. And so when you look at his numbers, you could either be a casual who says, he didn't even rush for 1,000 yards. Or you can pull out your calculator and see, let's see, 130 carries, 910 rushing yards. Wow, that's like 7 yards per carry, isn't it? And yeah, it is. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist, trust me, we can do it, to extrapolate those numbers out. And what happens if we add another 100 carries to that workload? He also happens to be able to run like a 3.8 40, so he doesn't hurt if you want to get him the ball out of the backfield. He can really hurt you in that department too. He is as poised. Devonta Chain is as poised for a breakout season at the tailback position as anybody at that position in college football. He is a guy I don't really have much doubt about. I am able to freely speak confidently about him because if he avoids injury, everything about how they're set up this year, everything about how their depth chart is set up this year lends him to really flashing on the national radar. And think about it. He's in the SEC West, so you're going to get Zach Evans at Ole Miss. You're going to, let's see what LSU does, but you're going to get Jahmyr Gibbs, for example, at Alabama. Let's see. We know we got about half a dozen running backs up at Arkansas. Let's see how A-Chain kind of fits on that national radar. He'll be a standout at A&M. I want to see how he fits on the national radar. Let's go to Nebraska for a second. Here's a really important name. Really important. Casey Thompson, former quarterback at Texas. He's now the starting quarterback. Presumably, we're going to presume that he's the starting quarterback at Nebraska. I'm going to read you some numbers here. In fact, you're looking at them on your screen right now. In 2021, Casey Thompson at Texas, he played 12 games. He was kind of in and out. They had some rotation at the quarterback position, but he was a 63.2% completion percentage guy. He threw 24 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. All right, so here's the question. If I just take that number, if I take that kind of statistical output and I drop it at Nebraska, what happens? I know one year does not automatically carry over to the other, so we can't just magically say, well, if he does that this year, they win all those close games they lost. I know that real football doesn't play out like that. But let's just humor each other for a second. If we get that kind of production, what they had last year at Nebraska in Adrian Martinez was a 14-10 touchdown to interception ratio, which is really what killed him because, he threw for 2,800 yards last year. So Martinez had more passing yards than Casey Thompson did. He was not as good in terms of completion percentage, but just turning the ball over. That's what hurt them a lot last year. I think if they get Casey Thompson at his reasonable best, I think that, they're winning more than 3 games is the first thing I think. The second thing is, what does that do? We're talking important names outside of just their own little personal space there. If Casey Thompson performs admirably this year, he resurrects the bowl hopes of the Nebraska program. He probably saves Scott Frost's job. It greatly shakes up the Big Ten Western Division race. And of course, you look at the opposite sides of those respective coins. If he doesn't pan out this year, then you're probably looking at a different head coach at Nebraska come 2023. So, no pressure or anything, but that's a really important name at Nebraska. At quarterback in Knoxville, this is why I didn't touch on him a whole lot a second ago, Hendon Hooker, really important name. Remember what I just said. Defensively, you got what you got with Tennessee. So you've got to come into every Saturday expecting that you probably need to be in that mid-30s range to at least feel like you're giving yourself a really good shot to win. It's one of the most high-leverage quarterback positions in America because of the tempo they work at. I know this kind of serves as its own individual segment on our YouTube channel, so I'm going to repeat what I just said on the live show. 2.99 plays per minute They're going to run a ton of plays. He's going to touch the ball a whole lot. So there are just more decisions that Hendon Hooker has to make on an average Saturday. And then you extrapolate that number out over, hopefully for him, 12 games. You see how his name, even in that column of quarterbacks, is just a little bit more important. Also, there's more weight on his shoulders. Offense has to carry more of the load at Tennessee than it does elsewhere. He'll be asked to do way more. They think he's fully capable of it. 31-3 touchdown to interception ratio guy last year. Also, and here's where he impacts the rest of the sport, they play Pitt in week 2. So he could go up there and he could not only shake Pitt in terms of, and I know this is a stretch, in terms of any playoff resume the Panthers may have, but it also serves to give us a good taste of what Pitt is this year. You know, it serves to give us a nice preview of how they may fare in ACC play by watching what they can or can't do against Hendon Hooker and Tennessee. But also, this is a team in Tennessee every year. You know they play Bama. You know they play Georgia. One of only a precious few teams who play both of them. But also, Tennessee goes to LSU this year. So there's a really good chance to do some things in the ACC or to an ACC team. You got a couple of shots at SEC Western Division teams, high profile in nature. You got the Georgia game. You also got Heisman conversation if you start to get deeper in the season and those numbers start to rack up in a pinball manner. Then I want to go to Waco, Texas. Now, the last time I was in Waco, I was broken down on the side of the road. Not the fondest of memories. But you know what else we got to do? We got to see a field storming, and we got to see Baylor take down Oklahoma, and we got to really learn a little bit more about Dave Aranda. Dave Aranda, one of the most important names in college football this year. We may be seeing a new model for him. You realize that? You never know it as it's happening, do you? You only look back years later and say, oh, that was the A model or the B model or the C model. Frank Beamer at Virginia Tech, that was the Virginia Tech model. Well, we may be seeing one form here. Everyone knows the Tier 1 model. Everyone knows the Bama model. Just go get the best players in the country, hire the best coaches in the country, fill your staff up with an army of analysts, and just get the best of everything. Yeah, it's one way to go about it. It's pretty foolproof. Not everyone can do that. And so Dave Aranda realizes that. And at Baylor, I think they're developing their own model. And one of the biggest compliments that you can get as a coach is the product you're putting on the field. The results that your program is yielding constantly outpace the sum of the parts. That's what we could reasonably say about Baylor last year. I expect we're going to be able to say it about them again this year. And then all of a sudden, you don't get to look at last year as being some fluke anymore, which I think some people are still prone to do. Anybody can just pull off a shocker for 1 year. You know, if Oklahoma would have had 6 more inches, we wouldn't be talking about you as a conference champ. You know how all that goes. Well, if they turn that trick again this year, all of a sudden you don't get to use that F word, that fluke word anymore, nor any other F words around here. Let's make it a family-friendly program. It's not Brandon Walker. We're not savages. And also, you get the rest of the country if that happens. If Baylor's successful again this year, you get the rest of the country that's not named Ohio State or Georgia or Clemson, that doesn't have a Tier 1 or even a Tier 2 budgetary advantage or resource advantage, and they say, okay, well, we got to find ourselves a different way to do it too. Let's start to look at what this Aranda guy has been doing at Baylor. Now, I'm not ignorant. I know most people have already long since taken note of what he's been doing, but some people who are more result-oriented still need that year-over-year proof of performance. If they get it this year, you know, not to mention what that could do with the Big 12 race. If Baylor is standing there as a Big 12 champ again, and it's not Oklahoma again, and Texas is not there again, you talk about some patience wearing very thin. They may be prepared to deal with a lot of things in the Big 12. What they're not prepared to deal with is Baylor owning the conference. That's not what they're prepared to deal with. They watched that happen. They watched a Baylor program rise to prominence once upon a time, and then when it got taken apart for the reasons and in the manner in which it got taken apart, which I don't think we need to rehash, most of the folks up and down the Big 12 said that's the last we'll hear from them. You were wrong. As it turns out, you were dead wrong. And you got a guy out there running things the right way, and I happen to be a big fan of his. We're not reporters here, so we can say whatever we want. I'm a big fan of Dave Aranda. So selfishly, I'm pulling for this to be true. Last name for tonight, in honor of producer Jesse. Sean Clifford. Sean Clifford has made the list. Sean Clifford, quarterback at Penn State. Even the most casual, non-college football fans know who Sean Clifford is at this point. He's a veteran college football player. He is the definition of the veteran college football player. You know, one of the most anemic and sad, pitiful stats from the 2021 college football season was the fact that Penn State did not have a 100-yard rusher in any game. They were badly banged up early on at the running back position, so that, yielded that result. But also, when we look at 2022, if we're going to rectify that, it doesn't just start at tailback. It starts at quarterback, because they also lost their quarterback last year in the Iowa game. I think we all remember how that panned out. But if you look at their offensive output, they were 80th or worse in every key total offensive metric, every key running statistic. I mean, they're 80, 90, 105, so it wasn't good enough. Sean Clifford holds the keys to all that, because the bottom line is you can get me excited about Nick Singleton, you can get me excited about the prospects of this run game, but you can't get me excited about it if you haven't replaced Jahan Dotson, if you don't have precision at the quarterback position, and if I'm just able to stack the box against you every Saturday. And right or wrong, I think a lot of people feel like they can do that against Sean Clifford and Penn State. So all you have to do is prove him wrong. That's all you have to do. If he's able to do that, if they're able to operate at a high enough and an efficient enough level offensively, well, then what does that do? Because, right now, if we're looking at their schedule, they play Ohio State on the 29th of October. You know that. You probably aren't paying a lot of attention to it, though, because you think to yourself, even with the home field advantage, they just can't score enough. They can't keep up with Ohio State. Well, all of a sudden, if Sean Clifford's playing at the highest level of his career, if that young talent, especially at tailback, is panning out a little earlier than expected, if that transfer receiver talent, and Parker Washington is elevating his game already on campus as well, if all that's kind of happening simultaneously, well, all of a sudden, there's a long way between September 1 and October 29. And also, they got a trip to Michigan a couple of weeks before that. All of a sudden, that Big Ten race looks a whole lot different, doesn't it? So there's a lot. There's a lot to be decided based on how Sean Clifford plays this year.